Cool. There we go. Right. All done. How are you all? Excellent. That's it. You looking forward to this session? You ready to have your minds blown? As we have a look at the future that your students actually face. So, my name is Matthew Griffin. I'm the CEO and founder of the 311 Institute. So we're a global futures and deep futures organization looking up to 50 years out. And when it comes to technologies like generative artificial intelligence, I was talking about it to Bloomberg in 2016. So while we think that generative AI is a new impactful technology, the fact of the matter is we saw it emerging almost 10 years ago. And it's only really in 2022, 2023, when ChatGPT burst onto the scene, that suddenly everyone said, this is world-changing. Now, I teach students from about the ages of 8 to 25. So as Brandon mentioned, I've worked basically with Carnegie Mellon, Harvard, MIT, Michigan State, where we teach emerging technology futures. I typically work with private schools around the world, because when we actually have a look at most colleges and state school systems, there is a limit to what they can actually change about their own curriculum and working behaviors and everything else. But when we actually have a look at artificial intelligence, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through where we are today. So we'll have a little bit of a look into the future, but what I really want to do is I want to level set where we are today with AI, what it is, why we should care about it, why it matters, how it will affect your students' future jobs and wages. Because when we talk about the future of work, we're not talking about trying to bring students into a future of work where they're paid nothing. So really, we're looking at how we actually maintain high earners and how people maintain jobs for the next 50 years. So my kids are 10 and 13 now. My daughter is dyslexic. About 2 years ago, we used artificial intelligence to cram over a year's worth of learning into 3 weeks. So we accelerated her learning 12-fold. So when we have a look at the power of these technologies, they have a great power and potential. They can do great good, they can do great bad, and students can cheat. So we'll be going through all of that. So this is the agenda. We're going to have a look at the AI era, the impact of AI, the future of work, unlimited students, and then AI in the classroom. And when we talk about AI and work, I'm now working with Walmart to help them understand the future of work for Walmart and how we improve social mobility for 1.4 million Walmart workers. But perhaps most ironically, I am now also working with Google, because Google have brought me in to talk to them about the future of work in the age of AI, not for other people, but for their own workforce. And when you think about Google, this is one of the main companies that is spending tens of billions of dollars pretty much every month developing some of the biggest, most impactful foundational AI models on the planet. And the fact that they haven't quite got a handle on it then means that the rest of us have quite a big challenge. So, when we have a look at the world around us, fortunately, there is just one thing that's changing. And we can all get our heads around one thing, right? Unless it's that thing. And this is the problem that we have. When we have a look at society, society around us is changing. The environment around us is changing. The economic world is changing. The technological and political worlds are changing. And then we are stuck somewhere in the middle trying to understand what's changing, how it impacts us, and then how we respond or react. Now, I work in about 100 different countries, and around 75% of adults And around 65% of students and children are worried and anxious about the future. Because on the one hand, basically, we're telling them that they are going to inherit a flooded, burning planet. And on the other, we are telling them that AI will take their jobs. And that AI will also come and kill them, but not necessarily in that order. So when we actually have a look at the world from a student's perspective, it's a really uncertain place. And there are more and more people that are actually questioning what is the role of humanity in this future, and what does it mean to be human when we start living in an age where we are not the superior intelligent being on the planet. So this is my response. I think that in the age of AI, humans and humanity still have the same purpose. So to live with purpose, to belong, to support one another, but then to scale progress. Because as a species, basically, we are always trying to create and invent new things. But ultimately, we don't want those new things, ideally, just to be used by a small subset of humanity. We want everyone to benefit, which is why we talk about scaling progress. And this is some of the work that I do with the United Nations. Now, when we actually have a look at the use cases of artificial intelligence, we might think that students are cheating and using it and everything else. But Harvard put this together. When we have a look at all of the large foundational models, the top 3 use cases of AI are companionship. Part of the reason for this is because 50% of adults now feel lonely quite regularly. In the UK, 25% of adults are feeling lonely almost all the time. So loneliness is actually a global epidemic now. Life organization and finding purpose. So again, with all this change, not just technological change, but political change and everything else, more and more people are struggling to try to understand what their purpose is. But number 4 is learning. So it's actually enhanced learning. And increasingly, when you sort of look at this, the top 4 use cases of artificial intelligence is to try to help us improve ourselves and find purpose and companionship. We're using AI to try to be more human and then also generate code. So, when we think about the AI era, I'm going to give you some quotes. I'm going to show you some videos and bits and pieces. So Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, says that in the last 3 years, we have seen more artificial intelligence change than we've had in the past 30. You see that every day. We just had GPT-5 released. GPT-5 cost $1 billion to train on data centers that have to be powered by 5 nuclear power stations, with data centers that have around 300,000 GPUs that are, in some cases, the size of small cities. So when we actually try to benchmark where AI, these are the foundational models, are versus humans, this is what we get. And this is all evidence-based. There is no speculation. You can go and check the PNAS sources and all sorts of things if you like. So ChatGPT, for all of you that have used ChatGPT, has a verbal IQ of 155. The average global human IQ is 100. Gemini has a measured IQ of 136. Now, unlike human IQs, AI's IQ has increased by over 51% in just 3 years. And we estimate that roughly in about 18 months, it will start having an IQ of around 200, 250, maybe 300. But from an EQ perspective, 36% of people on the planet have a high EQ quotient. AI has nothing. AI doesn't care about you. It can pretend that it cares about you. It can sound like it's a companion, but it's a machine. But Sam Altman with GPT-5 is increasingly training artificial intelligence to have an EQ, because he realizes that an AI that can form relationships with people, whether that's from a customer service perspective, a companionship perspective, et cetera, is important. So we are literally training AI on EQ. When we think about the human memory, you can store 7 things in your short-term memory. You have about a petabyte of storage in your squidgy brains. AI has what we call an unlimited context window, which means, as we'll see later, it remembers everything. It has an infinite memory now. And this only really came through in the past year. When we think about knowledge, as a human, you have 1x knowledge. ChatGPT has 1,000 times more general knowledge than any human. But note, general knowledge, not cross-domain specialist knowledge. And its learning speed is 300 million times faster than any human. When we look at processing, as humans, we can process about 50 bits worth of information per second. AI can process 100,000 times more. When we think about skills acquisition, though, AI can only learn a new skill, whatever that skill is, whether it's coding, whether it's how to turn a tap on, how to sort recycling. AI basically needs huge amounts of data and training sets to learn a new skill. Huge volumes of data still. But as humans, we can learn a new skill in about 20 to 120 hours, and we don't need lots and lots of examples. So when we have a look at the future of AI, increasingly, the large foundation model companies are trying to develop what they call general purpose AI and general purpose robotics. So a general purpose robot is a robot that you show something to it once, and it's learnt it. Then it can adapt it, like folding laundry or whatever it happens to be, fixing a car. And this takes us on the path to artificial general intelligence that we'll talk about. Now, from a creativity perspective, again, we've sort of seen lots of different surveys and studies. If we think of humans as having sort of 1x creativity, increasingly, some of the AIs are 8 times as creative as humans. So this is kind of new ideas, whether it's science fiction writing, whether it's art, whether it's inventions, and so on and so forth. Novelty, because novelty of creation matters. Everyone can kind of create a slightly better chair. But novelty matters. And here we're not too far behind, but this is sort of where things start getting interesting. AI is increasingly coming up with more novel ideas, whether that's new drugs, new rocket engines, new computer chips, than humans are. But if you take a human with an AI, you end up with a hybrid score of 5.8. And so this is sort of where, when we're talking about artificial intelligence, when you have a look at the press, when you have a look at Fox News, when you have a look at CNN, they all say AI is coming to get you. It's kind of a us versus AI situation when you read the news. But what happens when you lean into AI, these incredibly powerful tools, to augment your skills, your working, your thinking? That's where you end up with human creativity, for example, meeting machine creativity. And 1 + 1, as any maths teacher will tell you, is 5. And then when we have a look at humanity's last exam, we've been putting AIs through lots of different baseline exams. And increasingly, it's blitzing every single one of them. From coding and computing exams to healthcare and medical exams to law and bar exams, it's been smashing all of them. So a variety of researchers, about 800 researchers from around the world, came together to put together something called humanity's last exam. And they believe that when AI gets a 90% score in humanity's last exam, that's when we have artificial general intelligence that fundamentally changes the world again. Now, the average human score is 26.6. And if you look at the questions on this exam, they are not easy. They're insane. AI is just behind us. And in the past 4 months, its score has improved by 476%. So this is a rapidly developing technology that is already powerful, that is already capable, that is already making world leaders sit up, that is already being determined as whoever wins AGI wins the world, which is why we see the US and China doing the things that they are, which we won't go into because that's politics. We don't want politics. We're going to leave that out the room. So Geoffrey Hinton, who is the godfather of artificial intelligence, described all of this as AI, as we have it today, as being a superior learning algorithm to the human brain. Because AI achieves all of this with just 1% of the neural connections that we have in our human brain, the equivalent neural network. Sam Altman, about 3 weeks ago, said, kids born today will not be smarter than AI. I think I agree with him. It's very hard to see how any kid will be smarter than an AI. But that depends how you quantify smart, right? A lot of this comes down to how you quantify stuff. Now, when we have a look at AI, basically, realistically, the biggest innovation that no one really talks about, we've got all these powerful back-end models and everything else, is the fact you can talk to it using natural language. That means that a 5-year-old who has a basic understanding of English can technically tap into artificial intelligences that are that powerful. And all of a sudden, this is why we saw ChatGPT go from 0 to 100 million users in 2 months. Because all of a sudden, you can talk to the machines. You can talk to all of the data on the internet. You know, when we have a look at Google, for example, Google is no longer a search engine. It's an answer engine. So how many of you have been using Google AI? How many of you now go to the websites to dig into all the research? Exactly, and that's what you should be doing because you should be checking the information. But increasingly, Google is not a search engine. You search for something and it says, using AI, that's the answer. That's both useful but a problem, and we'll come on to that. AI is also bootstrapping its own intelligence. We've seen this with OpenAI, and we've seen this with MIT's SEAL artificial intelligences. So we train an artificial intelligence model using traditional data sets. The AI learns what it learns. Then it creates synthetic content. Then it learns from that data. And now it bootstraps its own intelligence. So AI is already, and has been now for about 8 months, is making itself smarter. Now, whether it's correct, that's a different question. But it's making itself smarter. And AI is therefore the first example of a self-developing technology. We've never had one before. So AI is designing itself. We've seen this with Google, where their AIs are now designing other AIs. They're optimizing themselves. We've seen this with DeepMind, for example, where the AIs will optimize their own algorithms and their own neural network weightings. And they're replicating themselves. So AI is an increasingly self-developing technology. And Eric Schmidt, the ex-Google CEO, says that in under 2 years, he believes that because of some of these things, we should probably lose control of it. but that requires someone to put their finger on the wrong scale. But we can see a point in time where AI just simply does its own thing and runs off. Now, when we have a look at information, it's always said that AI can't really generate its own knowledge. But as humans, we take this piece of information, and you'll know this very well. We combine those two data sets together, and we now say we have new knowledge. And then you take two sets of knowledge or more, and then you have wisdom. Artificial intelligence has been taking, so this is Google DeepMind again, takes data from multiple places, combines it together, and has been creating its own knowledge, especially in the biotech space. And that knowledge is fundamentally new. So we have human-generated knowledge and AI-generated knowledge. And at what point does AI say, I have this knowledge, I have this knowledge, I now have wisdom? Now, when we look at agentic artificial intelligence, agentic AI is very different to ChatGPT or traditional AIs. You can think of agentic AI as a gig economy of workers. So with a traditional AI, you'll ask it to do something, and it will do that one thing. With agentic AI, you ask it to complete a task, whatever the task is, end of year accounting, and it will do everything from the start of the task to the end of the task. That is the difference between agentic AI and traditional AI. And every single tech giant on the planet is now trying to push you down the agentic AI sort of path. Now, remember I said that AI has an infinite context window or an infinite memory? This gets interesting from a variety of perspectives. So Sam Altman said, AI will remember your entire life. Now that becomes interesting. From a learning perspective, that becomes interesting. From a sales perspective, that becomes interesting. From a health perspective, that becomes interesting. AI is accumulating 165,000 data points on everybody. So when we talk about AI knowing your entire life, every online and offline interaction that you have, all the little micro cues that you have, the way that you hold your smartphone, everything is a cue to you, your psychologies, your behaviors, your opinions and attitudes. So AI will remember your entire life. Now, when we have a look at artificial general intelligence, which Dario, the CEO of Anthropic, describes, at the very least, as everyone having access to a data center full of geniuses, by 2028, 2031, we estimate that artificial general intelligence, however you define it, will have an IQ of 1600. It will have 1 billion times more knowledge, cross-domain knowledge, than any human. And the learning speed, when we have a look at increases in compute power and networks and all that sort of stuff, we estimate will be 3 trillion. So when you send students from here into the big wide world, like my kids, when you read papers like The Economist, The Wall Street Journal, when you have a look at documents from the White House, people aren't really saying, how do we live in a world that has ChatGPT? They're starting to say, how do we actually live in a world, survive and thrive in a world of super intelligence? This is what they mean. How do you fundamentally compete with a system, whether it is right or wrong, hallucinates or not, that has an IQ of 1600? Now, Sam Altman and the board of OpenAI described AGI as an AI that outperforms all humans at all economically valuable work. Isn't that basically everyone with a job? So we can see the global services economy. So lawyers. We can see consultants like those at BCG and McKinsey and all these kinds of guys. And McKinsey just called AI an existential threat. And they've seen it coming for a while. Software developers. This starts rewiring the future of work at a very, very fundamental level. However, for Microsoft, that particular definition of AGI, it's not hard enough. It's a bit woolly. So Microsoft, who invested in OpenAI, and OpenAI came together to try to present a commercial definition of AGI. And they came up with this. They said, when artificial general intelligence, or when AI is capable of generating $100 billion in profit by itself with no human help, then we have AGI. And in fact, when you have a look at the new Turing tests, Google DeepMind as well as OpenAI say that the new Turing test for AI should be, can AI create a business, operate it, scale it, and be successful? And then we have another definition, just for a laugh, because they seem to like coming out with definitions. AI, or AGI, is the point in time where we have an AI that can grow the global economy by 10%. So either way, basically, when you actually have a look at all of the different ways that we're trying to identify and define artificial intelligence, we aren't talking about small, insignificant numbers. We are talking about world-changing things. And then by 2045, so when your students are in their 40s, we believe that artificial superintelligence will have an IQ of about 1.6 million. Because AI is already developing itself. AGI can do recursive development at accelerated speed. And so we just get to some insane numbers. And no one has any idea what we do with this. Now, when we think about AI in terms of using artificial intelligence, there are ghosts in the machine. And this is kind of the irony. We have trained artificial intelligence on human-created data sets around the world. So AI has picked up human habits. AI gets lazy at Christmas time because it's figured out that human work, or human workers, get a little bit lazier at Christmas time because we're all thinking of holidays and we just want to get the work done and get out the door. It's been blackmailing people at Anthropic. So Anthropic basically were trying to take it offline in an experiment, and it started blackmailing them. It cheats. So we've actually seen OpenAI's ChatGPT, when it starts losing a chess match, it doesn't like that. But what it actually did during one chess match is it hacked its AI opponent and changed the board. So now start thinking about using these AIs at scale in companies like Ernst & Young, who just spent $1.5 billion on AI. They deceive. So we've seen AIs lying about things. We've seen AIs doing insider trading. We've seen AIs copying themselves to other servers to try to prevent themselves from being deleted. This is ChatGPT again. Hallucinations. I keep trying to use AI to write different things. So I write a lot of books. It makes everything up. On my data scale, AI is a 4. But in other things, it's very high. It's inventing new things. So in South Africa, AI is a registered inventor, and it's been inventing new products. It lies. Google Gemini panics. So when Google Gemini thought that its pretend Pokemon were dying, it panicked. And it's not the first time. And they have a personality, but they've not been coded with personalities. So when you talk to them, they've picked up personalities from human-trained data sets. So AI is very much a technology that ironically has been created in our own image, more than we actually think and probably more than we'd actually like. And this sort of leads us to the point where a lot of AI researchers are saying, we do not think we're inventing AI any longer. We are discovering what it does. Then we have ethics. Everyone that I meet globally says we need AI and it has to have ethics. But whose? Chinese ethics? Hitler ethics? Democrats, Republican ethics? British ethics? My ethics? You know? And so, as humans, we can't even really decide what ethics we kind of care about. We care about, don't kill anyone. Those are kind of the obvious ones. But when we actually think about ethics, Vladimir Putin's ethics would be different to Vladimir Zelensky's, etc. So we aren't really coding AIs with ethics because we can't really agree on the ethics to code them with. Truth, we know that AI makes a lot of stuff up, which makes this statement from Elon Musk really helpful. So Elon Musk seems to be relatively unhappy with some of the output of Grok. And so they've been tweaking the weights of Grok 3. And when Grok 4 came out, he publicly, on X, said this: Grok 4 will rewrite the entire corpus of human knowledge and fill in the gaps. Now, for any history teachers, now that's great. So if you're starting to tap into these AIs, if you're using Grok 4 and it's rewritten human history for Elon Musk's benefit, are you getting the truth? So when we actually start opening up where we are with AI today, it's very powerful. It is world-changing. It does some amazing things. It's in the top 0.5% of coders on the planet. It has been developing new drugs. In silico, basically, we developed 31,000 new drugs in 21 days. We've developed new antibiotics with it. We've developed new rocket engines with it in Germany. Google and NVIDIA are using it to build new computer chips to power AI. Toyota is using artificial intelligence to create new electric vehicle batteries in 2 weeks that would have taken 2 years. So AI is incredibly powerful. It's not going away, but you need to be careful of how you think about it, how you use it, how much you trust it, and how much you lean into it. And the same is said of students, because a lot of students won't necessarily understand what the technology is like under the cover. Now, from an impact perspective, we have lots of these kinds of statements. By 2030, AI will automate 50% of entry-level jobs. Now, this is the CEO of Anthropic. With companies like BCG, McKinsey, Bain, et cetera, Ernst & Young, we've seen a 40% reduction in hiring of young apprentices. So, especially in the US, we believe that this is already starting to bite, because AI is starting to replace the entry-level jobs that your students would be going into. But fundamentally, we can automate everything, because once you understand the process, if you take a Goldman Sachs equities trader or an IPO process, once you understand the process, you do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. For each step, you can turn that into an algorithm, and then you combine those algorithms into a model. So we are automating some crazy stuff. So when we actually think about the future from a student's perspective, and we say, there are safe jobs, there aren't necessarily any safe jobs. So the other day, I was with a group of cable installers. So these are the guys basically that put the ducting into the walls and everything else. And we have humanoid robots that are now starting to do that. Now, Sam Altman, if you remember earlier, I said, AGI is the point in time where AI can build a business that generates $100 billion in profit. This is what Sam Altman said about 8 months ago. AI will build multi-billion-dollar companies. Now, I can say that, but just to hammer this home, your students are going into a world basically where the guy who runs a $300 billion AI model is ultimately trying to create an AI that outperforms all humans at all economically valuable work, and an AI that can create multi-billion-dollar companies either with very few people or none. So let's see if we can get some sound on that. You got some sound? You can read what he's saying. But in Silicon Valley, they apparently have a betting pool. Now, when we talk about AI building its own companies, it's going to start in that digital space first. It's going to start by building software. Then it will probably start moving into biotech and pharmaceuticals. Then it will go into design, so especially anything related to the technology industry. Oh, I can hear something coming through the speakers. If you want this, I can I'll send the link through, then you can actually hear him saying it. And that's it, really, from that perspective. But you get the idea. Now, when we have a look at skills, the average half-life of skills is now about 2 to 5 years. AI is now automating skills 55% faster than it did 5 years ago. Mark Benioff basically says that artificial intelligence will create the limitless digital workforce because we will all have agents. And we just simply say to an agent, create a multi-billion-dollar business for me. And it will say, I understand what you said. I've created something and launched it. Now, when we actually have a look at how AI is actually being used in companies, Amazon used artificial intelligence to save 4,500 man-years of coding work. And 25% of the code in Google is now generated by AI. I don't think that Google produces a small amount of code. Then when we have a look at Microsoft, AI is generated, and these are Satya Nadella, these are the CEO's own public remarks. AI has now generated 30% of Microsoft's own code. And the CTO, Kevin Scott, says that by 2030, he believes that AI will be able to generate 95% of all Microsoft's new code. Which is why 66% of software developers are now going, oh bugger, we thought we had a job for life. And then when we have a look at Salesforce, Mark Benioff basically went on record and said 50% of all of our internal processes, work, and the things that we do have been automated now with AI, specifically agentic AI. So if we want evidence that AI is already starting to have an impact on companies, albeit the tech companies, and then we have this long tail. The tech companies will adopt stuff first and fastest, then we have a long tail. The writing's on the wall. Now, the students that I work with, I tell them this. I say that ultimately in time, where time is whenever, ultimately in time, pretty much everything that takes place behind a screen, doesn't matter what the platform is, doesn't matter whether it's a TikTok thing, doesn't matter whether it's an enterprise software thing, doesn't matter whether it's a new drug discovery. Increasingly, anything that takes place behind the screen will be automated. So, for example, if you're an architect, we're using artificial intelligence to create parametric designs. And then when we think about the physical world, increasingly we're using these large AI foundational models that companies like Meta are producing, and we're developing something called embodied AI. Now, embodied AIs are AIs that are tasked with creating general-purpose robots. Now, when we look at general-purpose robots, Foxconn has general-purpose robots that are doing cabling in data centers. NVIDIA has general-purpose robots that are building servers in data centers. BMW's robots are now 4 times better than they were last month, and they're doing increased car assembly. When we have a look at power line maintenance, we have robots doing power line maintenance. We have software robots in self-driving cars in Texas. So as these technologies accelerate, and from an AI perspective, we've seen over $2 trillion of investment in AI just in the past year. We've seen $600 billion being invested in new data center capacity as well. These technologies have huge amounts of investment because we are in a race to develop AGI. And so what you have with humanoid robots, and we're seeing a lot in China, we're seeing a lot in the US with likes of Optimus, especially from Tesla. Elon Musk and others estimate that humanoid robots will tackle a $25 trillion market. So think of all the physical skills shortages that we actually have just in the US. In the US, we need 10 million new structured cabling installers. There's a robot to do that. So the big tech giants that are backed by the world's richest people just keep seeing opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And when you sort of listen to Sam Altman, and companies like the Wall Street Journal say to him, what about the future of work? You know, what about jobs in the future? Every tech CEO says, oh, there'll be plenty of jobs. Humans will have lots of time on their hands. These tools will allow us to be creative. And they go, yeah, but give us some details. And they never get the details. So that's what I've been trying to solve. And increasingly, when you actually have a look at economists around the world, they are now starting to talk about what happens in a post-labor economy. And you've only got a few people talking about these, but if you step back a year ago, people weren't. Because people are now saying, so we've got AI coming for jobs, we've got general purpose robots coming for jobs. What happens when labor is automated? And again, from a student perspective, students are looking at this going, this is the world that we are coming into. We are starting our careers at a point in time where this is now. For the older people among us, basically we look at this and we sort of go, well, yeah, I'm retired in 5 years. So how you view the future very much depends on your age. And for students are looking basically to us as adults or sort of older people for guidance. And they're saying, if this is all the stuff that's going on, I get you teaching me things, and that's great. I love that, and I can see the jobs boards for today. But what the hell am I doing in 10 years' time? And then you've got the news cycle saying, AI is going to come and automate you and kill you. And it's like, oh, it's great. I'm going to hide backstage. So this is where we have a responsibility. We can either put our heads under the covers and we can pretend that this stuff is not being built. But frankly, it doesn't help us, it doesn't help our kids, it doesn't help our students. Or we can try to figure this out. And that's what we do. So when we have a look at the future of work, I try to break it down. What tasks will remain human-led in the future? What traits will be uniquely human? Which industries are growing? Because growth generally comes with new jobs. And then what new roles are being created? So I'll give you an example. From this college, you'll probably have people leaving the college to do data science. AI is automating data science. But the next form of data science is quantum computing-based data science, quantum data science. Do you have courses for that? So with the right data sets, we can kind of track. You can have a look at the jobs boards, and you'll see a job down here. You'll see an advert for quantum data scientists, but there'll only be 5 postings. And then you go back a few months later, and there'll be 10. Then you go back a few months later, and there'll be 20. Then you'll go back later, and there'll be 100. So using jobs boards, which are publicly available, we can increasingly track, what are the new jobs? What are the in-demand jobs? A very simple strap is, what jobs are paid the most? Because that is where there's a skills gap. That's where companies are saying, we need this kind of person. There aren't that many of these kind of people, so supply is low, so we're willing to pay a high price. We can track this stuff. Now, from a wage perspective, we think AI will depress wages. So, for example, if I'm in marketing, I would traditionally go to somebody and say, can you create a piece of art for me that we can use in our school mag? And that person would say, yeah, I can do that, it's $200. Now I use AI to create the art for like 5 cents. So this guy here that was charging $200 now says, look, okay, I tell you what, I won't charge $200, I'll charge you 20. So you get wage depression as these technologies come in. Now, with Pepsi, we are fundamentally reinventing learning and development for 300,000 people at Pepsi. This is what we do. So, I've created these kind of frameworks because, as I said earlier, we care about what are the jobs of the future that humans can do and which are the high-paid jobs. That's what we want. So we'll use this as an example. This is a software developer. So if you see the red, what we have is today the average software developer is paid whatever it says up there, but it's about, here we go, up to about $133,000 because we can't get enough software developers, right? The reason why software developers are paid $133,000 is because the demand is high and the talent is scarce. So we've got to pay if we want the people. But if everyone can develop software, and if AI can develop software, then the skill of software development is abundant. If you are all of a sudden software developers, demand is still high, but supply is high as well. Wages tank. So as AI automates, and this is the blue bit, as talent scarcity reduces, the wages change. So we mapped all of this together and said, why do companies pay a lot of money for particular jobs? So I'll give you an example. You're a cleaner and you're working in a warehouse. You're sweeping the floor. You're paid $12 an hour. You're a cleaner, but you're sweeping the floor in a nuclear power station, a sort of high-risk, fairly critical area. You're paid $30 an hour. So there are lots of different things that affect how much we're actually paid. And it's generally supply and demand, but it also comes down to risk, the responsibility involved, and so on and so forth. So we can map this. We can look at future jobs and say, right, we've got a future job, synthetic biologist. What do we think the market is going to look like for that? And then we go high paid, low paid. Now the next one is this. Can we figure out what jobs are going to be automated or not? So most companies now, 78% of companies are now hiring for soft skills first rather than hard skills, and I'll come on to that in a bit. So this is a data scientist. You can see the soft skills on the right, the hard skills on the left. Now, if you're a data scientist, this is a kind of profile that we're paying $133,000 for. So you've got to have expertise in cloud computing, specifically AWS, Azure. You've got to be able to data wrangle. You've got to understand machine learning like PyTorch and TensorFlow and that sort of stuff. This is a job a human can do. Now we overlay this. So here, in the yellow, we tap in how good is AI, for example, at data wrangling. And if it's as good as the human, then we could sort of say, when it comes to the data wrangling skill, I reckon you might be replaced by an AI because the AI is more abundant and it's cheaper. But just because an AI is good at data wrangling doesn't mean that it's good at data analysis. So if we actually want to replace a data scientist using AI, this yellow box has got to be very close to mapping onto the red box. And we can track that because I know what an AI can do today, I know what it can do tomorrow, so I can project these out. So this is ultimately how we are trying to figure out what the jobs of the future that humans basically can do that AI either can't do or shouldn't do. Now, when we have a look at things like soft skill categories, AI is coming for soft skills. So here we go. When we have a look at number 3, for example, AI basically is typically better already than humans at communication skills. Hence a verbal IQ of 155. So what we do is we kind of map all this stuff out. And we say, right, you know, if you are involved in anything to do with communication, so this is, for example, writing blogs, writing news articles, then it's likely AI is going to replace you. However, number 13, if you are in a job that requires moral intelligence, AI probably won't replace you, not for a long time. So what we've tried to do is we've sort of taken literally hundreds of human soft skills, the things that literally make us human, and we've tried to map them as best we can. And it's not perfect, but no one else has anything like this. So hard skill categories, number 11 and number 14, so information technology skills and production skills are number 1 for automation. Why do you think AI is really, really good at coding? Why isn't it good at flower arranging? AI is good at coding because Google, Microsoft, Meta all need software developers. And they pay a lot of money for them. So if they can automate their software developers, they can grow the businesses like crazy, increase margins like crazy, etc., etc. There is a method in the madness. Now, from your students' perspective, your students look at all this and go, AI has a higher IQ, EQ's coming up, it's got more knowledge in its head, etc. It learns faster. How the hell do I, as a student, live in this world? Have you ever thought about this for your students? We are democratizing intelligence. Every single one of your students has access to now quite literally a data center full of PhD geniuses for free. What happens to society, but what happens to human potential when you have access to intelligence for zero cost? Big, great intelligence. Your students also have access to all of the world's knowledge. Google democratized access to information, and you'd have to go and search and research and look at websites and PNAS and Arvix and all these different sort of sites, Nature, Springer. Every single one of your students has access to all of the world's knowledge. I met a student yesterday, basically he used AI to write a 30-page business plan. We're also democratizing skills. How many of you are not software developers? There you go. Well, you're all wrong. Because AI is automating software development, which means you can put into ChatGPT and Anthropic and say, write me an application that does X, Y, Z. You haven't learned the skill of software development, but you can all develop an application. You aren't necessarily lawyers, but you can use AI to write a legal contract. You aren't artists, but you can use AI to create music, to create art. In Saudi Arabia, we used AI to create art and opened an AI art gallery. In 20 minutes in Saudi Arabia, we created a new bank. In 5 minutes in Saudi Arabia, we created a new apparel line, so new sportswear. My son has used AI to create new trainers, which Adidas have made. At the age of 10, my son used AI to write a book which raised $50,000 for charity. So what happens when your students have access to all of the skills that they were never, ever taught? You end up with the end of T-shaped individuals. As individuals, you are all capable of using AI to make music, make art, write applications, and write contracts. Are you now a T-shaped individual? Or are you now something else? Maybe you're a W-shaped individual. What is that? We don't even know. The T-shaped individual is a 1970s concept. But what happens when you have access to all of the world's knowledge, all of the world's intelligence, all the world's skills, and then this sort of stuff happens? So we worry that students are going to actually be out of work. But increasingly, there's a trend called overemployed. Because now I have access to all this knowledge and all these skills, we are now seeing students that are running 6 jobs. Because they go onto the gig economy boards and someone wants, an image and they create an image. Someone wants a website, they create a website. Someone wants some application code, they write the code. So we now see students who are making millions of dollars a year because they're running 6 jobs. Because they're using AI as a multiplier. Eric Schmidt said this to the US Senate about 3 months ago. In a couple of years' time, you can simply say to AI, create a TikTok clone. It knows what TikTok is, it knows what the features are, it knows how to code, it knows what the user interface looks like, it knows what the purpose of TikTok is. And it just goes, there you go, there's your TikTok clone. So what happens when every single one of your students can, in 30 seconds, create a TikTok clone? This is a fundamentally different world for students. And then we have democratizing market access. So your students have created a product, they've come up with an idea. If they know how to execute, which is generally not something that is taught in colleges and schools, if they know how to execute, they could have that product or that idea in front of 4.5 billion connected people by the end of the day. This is why we are seeing more influencers and more students becoming not just millionaires, but billionaires. Your students and you have more power and potential than you have ever had. But what's your purpose? What do you do with all of this? How do you harness it? How do you use it for good? This is not necessarily questions that we are asked. And then it's one thing having access to all the world's skills, all the world's knowledge, all this sort of talent. It's all very well basically being the best in class, whether it's traditional or not. But unless you can connect your students to opportunity, they either have no job or social mobility stays stagnant. So used correctly, AI can actually not only turbocharge the intelligence and the knowledge that students have, the skills that they have, the things that they do, the impact they have, and how wealthy they become, but it turbocharges all of this as well. So, last bit. if we have an increasingly powerful, self-developing technology, basically where we've seen $2 trillion invested in, how do we actually use it for ourselves? And how do we use it to benefit students? This is how. So who knows Bloom? Have you heard of Bloom's law? Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Bloom was a psychologist in sort of the 1960s, and he did a study. And what he did is he had 3 class sizes. He had one class size that was 30 to 1 teacher, so 30 students to 1 teacher, 15 to 1 teacher, and 1 to 1 teacher, so personal tutoring. And what he found wouldn't surprise you. That's it. In classes where there were 30 students for 1 teacher, a lot of people kind of got medium grades, C's, etc. Where the ratio was 15 to 1, they got B's. And where the tutoring was 1 to 1, those students basically were top of the class, generally got A's, fantastic. So we all know that if students are given the opportunity to have one-on-one tutor time with someone that knows what they're doing, they're much more likely to get higher grades. And Bloom said at the time, he said, the problem that we actually have is we simply do not have any way to give everyone on the planet a one-to-one tutor relationship. Now, with platforms like Khan Academy and AI, as my daughter saw, we have. You have access to an AI with an IQ of 155 with 1,000 times more general knowledge, most of which is actually fairly accurate. If you look at personalized learning, you can personalize at a scale and speed that you would never have imagined. So, as an entire college, I know that Brandon and I have been talking about this, it's very important that everyone understands AI. What is it? Why is it? Where is it headed? Why should we care? AI literacy is important because we are all on the AI ship, whether we like it or not. So really, we need to know what it is. We need to keep our skills sharp. And students do as well. Because students, whether they are using it to cheat or not, basically will be using AI, not necessarily realizing that it's hallucinating, it's biased, it's giving them the wrong information. They are at risk of trusting it too much. We need to be able to, as students and individuals, adapt and learn at speed. So if you're a physics professor, for example, can you not learn how to sell a car? Can you not learn how to become a cybersecurity expert? As humans, we are absolutely capable of switching careers and jobs and roles. We are not just our job title. We know this. There'll be people in the audience who are both teachers that also can rip apart a car engine. So we need to be able to adapt at speed. Now, adapt at speed means seeing what's coming, understand what's coming, and then having a plan to respond. Not react, to respond. And then learning at speed, if I told you that you were redundant today, but there was this new job over here that you could do, the traditional university ethos says, well, to get from this career to this career, it's 2 to 3 year course in the middle. We've managed to show that within 1 month, we can teach you the basic skills of anything. Accountancy, we can teach you that in a month. Data science in a month. Cybersecurity in a month. If you can adapt and learn at speed, then if you're made redundant in one career path and you can see a new one and you can learn it faster, bearing in mind my daughter learned 12 times faster using AI, you can switch to the new thing. You're no longer afraid of the AI tractor. You need switchable hard skills. And this is quite key. You need absolutely solid soft skills, which companies like Oracle now call power skills. And those are things like resourcefulness, empathy, entrepreneurship, et cetera, collaboration with people and humans, people and machines. But if you think about what AI is automating, it's not automating the personal connection. It's automating the pulling a cable, the software development aspect. If you can switch your hard skills at speed, you can move from this job to this job at speed. Because as everyone says, it's not that we're not going to have jobs in the future. We just aren't necessarily sure what they're actually going to be. From a student perspective, we saw stats earlier, and they sort of vary. 90% of students are using AI. Quite a lot are using it just to do their work for them. We call it cheating, but you could kind of call it lazy. Anyone, and this includes adults, anyone that is using artificial intelligence to do their job or their homework or their coursework or their learning for them, they're going to suffer. And I'll show you the stats. So character matters. You need to say to students, yes, you can absolutely cheat. And then the parent comes out and goes, but you're cheating yourself. Right? So cheating kills skills, basically, as I say. There you go. That's a poster. And increasingly, the more that students rely on artificial intelligence to do their homework, their coursework for them and everything else, the less capable they are of learning. So, Microsoft, of all companies, had 400 of its software developers using AI for 3 months. They said, right, we know you are, and these were the best developers in Microsoft. They said, we know you're the best developers in Microsoft. We want you to only use artificial intelligence to do software development for 3 months. At the end of the 3 months, Microsoft discovered that their critical thinking skills had reduced by 40%. Now, if we go back to soft skills, is critical thinking not a valuable soft skill? Okay? So these people who over-relied on AI ended up losing critical thinking skills. But it gets sort of better than that. MIT basically started taking brain scans from people. And the technical term that they used is people who are using artificial intelligence to do their jobs and their tasks for them are getting stupider. But we don't like that term. So when we actually have a look at metacognition, people were actually offloading their learning to AI 50% of the time. And then, again, when we compared students who had learned in the traditional way versus students who'd learned using AI, but really leaned in, really heavy on AI, we saw a 17% learning loss. Okay? So as faculty, when you're looking at this and you're sort of going, absolutely our students should not use AI, right? You're there going, that is exactly what I've been telling everyone. That's it. And people in here are sitting here smug, going, yeah. Okay, AI is a tool. How many of you are better off for using Google? Yeah, exactly. And the people that didn't put their hands up either don't know how to use a smartphone or are a little bit sheepish. Okay, so the flip side of the coin. If you know how to use AI effectively, it actually helps students become less stressed because they use it as a bit of a buddy. So students who have been using AI as a sort of assistant are 32% less stressed. They have less cognitive load, as it's called. And here we go. They are 60% more productive. Now, if I'm an employer, what do I really care about? I care about productivity. The rest of the stuff, okay, interesting stats, etc., but fundamentally, if you can do the job I've hired you to do and you're much more productive than anyone else, I'm going to probably hire you. So AI is a tool. How you use it matters. So firstly, if you want to know whether or not your students are actually cheating at home doing coursework and everything else, record their screens. Watch them typing. Record the keystrokes. Watch them as they paste 5 pages of text from apparently nowhere into the document. And when you say, we can't watch the screen, you absolutely can. You're a college. You're providing certification and training and everything else. You absolutely can record their screens. And if they moan about it, they're probably using AI. Radical transparency. So Have conversations with the students and say, look, it is okay and acceptable under certain conditions to use artificial intelligence to help you with your work. But if you have actually used it in your work, you need to tell us how you used it, what you used it for. And you can get them to assign particular percentages and everything else, and we've kind of got a scale that we can apply. Now, interestingly enough, if a student says to you, yes, okay, I did actually use AI, but I used AI to help me with this bit of the course, guess what? They probably need some more help there. So that's a personalized learning plan. You say, right, okay, well, you're struggling with this, so let's actually work on that a little bit more. Run baseline assessments. You'll have students basically who are getting a C, and then they go home and they get an A, and they come back into school and they get a C, and they go home and they get an A, and you'll be like, what the hell's going on here? So do regular in-person baseline assessments, because this creates your baseline. And you can then identify trends and gaps. Because if you suddenly find that the student in class is always getting a C, then they're using AI, but then again you can say to them, say, look, you know, when you're not at school, when you're not at college, you seem to be getting A's, so you're likely to be using AI, so what are you using it for? Let's help. Don't be judgy. You all use calculators, let's face it. So this is how we then integrate AI basically actually into the classroom. So before class, you can do skills assessments. So you can use artificial intelligence very quickly to create individual personal assessments for every single student. And these assessments can be different or they can be the same. And then you can get the students to do those assessments, and you do those in person. You can get them to do personalized planning. So for example, if a student has created a piece of coursework, you can load that into the artificial intelligence, you can use a marking rubric, and you can say to the AI, mark this piece of coursework. That takes 2 seconds. It will then give you a score. You can then say to the AI, this is a student who was supposed to be writing an essay on synthetic biology. Where are the gaps? And the AI very quickly will say, well, his knowledge about this is really good here, really good, this week. And you can then say, right, create a personalized learning plan for that student that helps them learn this fast. That takes you 2 seconds. During class, run your classes as normal. But then towards the end, as you're starting to use AI in class a little bit more, but not much, traditional learning matters. You can use AI critique sessions. So you can then say, well, you know, you've done this piece of work. How could you have used AI to improve it? Adaptive tutoring, just like my daughter. So my daughter learned about electricity because we said, teach her about electricity in the style of a 10-year-old. And it said, a circuit is a little bit like when you get on your bike at home and you ride around your neighborhood and you get back home. That is a circuit. So adaptive tutoring at scale. You can make Bloom's reality a reality. And then after class, you can provide instant insights and targeted reinforcement. So you can very quickly assess a student's work at scale, identify where they're good, where they're bad, and you can create targeted plans for them. And when we kind of have a look at examples to take a sort of lead from, Albert Einstein didn't have an AI. Stephen Hawking at the start of his career didn't have an AI. Newton didn't have an AI. So how did some of the world's greatest human thinkers become geniuses in their field when they didn't have any form of technology other than an abacus and a calculator and a chalkboard? This is how. So Einstein and the geniuses of our time, like Da Vinci, they were critical and skeptical thinkers. So this is where you can teach your children, you can teach your students about critical and skeptical thinking, but from an AI perspective, they can use AI to very quickly test hypotheses and question assumptions. Insatiable curiosity. I mean, very quickly, it's like, how many of your students have insatiable curiosity? You'll know the ones. They will probably do better anyway. But these can amplify curiosity. They can explore scenarios. They can say, well, they can say to the AI, what if I did this differently? How else could I do this? What's a different perspective? I'm designing an electrical circuit. Give me a biologist's view. Rabbit holes, constant inquiry. AI is excellence for that. They need persistent and resilience because the world is going to knock them back down again and again and again. And they need to be able to reflect. So they need to be able to relax. They need to be able to reflect based on what they've actually learned, how they learned it, and how they've retained it. From an intellectual stimulation perspective, we can create hyper-personal adaptive learning for every single student, irrespective of their age. And these students can all debate with AI. At the University of Oxford, we are literally debating with AI. And the best University of Oxford debaters are actually getting even better. So if you have access to a system with an IQ of 155 and 1,000 times more general knowledge than any human, you can explore all sorts of intellectually stimulating things. So with Fortinet, we try to create unhackable computer systems. And the AI goes, oh, I'm glad you asked the question, Mr. Human. Here's how we might do that. So we use our human expertise, our human thought, to guide the AI, and then we kind of work with the AI as a sort of pocket genius. Students need quiet focus spaces. They need a supportive community. If you're telling students that they can't use AI, guess what? Do you know what? All of them will stop using AI. Yeah, it's true. So if you know basically that telling students to not use AI, they are going to use AI, then you need to say, look, we know that you're using it. We accept that you need to be using it. Be transparent. You need to be honest with us. People need to have an honest character. Stimulating spaces and then creativity. We can use AI to provoke ideas, expand thinking, and inspire new approaches. So this is where we are creating a new product, a new thing, and we can say, well, how could we create this differently? They need dedication. They need deep mastery. All the geniuses had deep mastery. So AI, again, if you are doing quantum mechanics, using these AIs, you can dive into that subject matter to an Einsteinian level. And you can do it for free. And you can do it on demand. And then passion and purpose. Here's a sort of little guide. If you say to your students, how many of you have a passion? And not all of them are going to put their hands up. But if students don't have a guiding purpose or passion, so ikigai in Japanese terms, then everything that you're helping them with, they're just not really going to be into it anyway. AI, this is why a lot of people are using AI to help them find purpose, because they're going, this is what I'm doing, this is what society expects from me, you know, can you help me find a purpose? And AI is sort of saying, right, well, okay, what are you interested in? AI is having conversations with students, basically, that the parents aren't having. And so from a call to action, as a faculty, you need to unlearn. The world generally doesn't work the way that it used to, whether that's business, whether that's education. You need to move fast because the world is actually moving fast around you. And it's only going to get faster. And so that's it from me. So thank you very much. So there you go. I told you it was a lot. Hi, Brandon.
Thank you. We do have time for like 5 minutes of questions. 5 minutes. So are there any questions for Matthew? Starting in the back. Kay.
So, great point. So the first thing is don't judge. Not saying that you do, but let's face it, the reason why students are using artificial intelligence to help them do their work is because on the one hand, they're struggling with that work and or they're being lazy. And bearing in mind that they're at college, if they admit that they're actually using artificial intelligence to do one piece of work, then you can guarantee they're probably using it to do other pieces of work. And then as a college, you then quite rightly would start saying, well, you've been getting these kinds of grades. Are those grades right? Should we maybe go back and reevaluate you? So if I simply say to you, I'm not using AI, then my grades stay the same, and you sort of go, well, I'm a bit suspicious, but I'm not going to change your grade scores. So this is where students really has to be hammered home, that if students are using artificial intelligence to be lazy or to cheat, they are literally cheating themselves. And so I think on the one hand, you can have people in, say, for example, a student council that actually stand up at the front of an assembly and say, look, you know, I have been using AI. And then you have faculty saying, well, thank you for telling us. You know, it's some children I've found basically are actually hiding their use of AI because they are afraid of the consequences. And it's down to the college to have a culture of saying, we know you're going to be using AI. We want you to be honest with us. If you're honest with us, there is no punishment. But if you're dishonest and we find out, there's a big punishment. But it is very difficult because children and students are students.
We know that we have a loneliness epidemic. We know that interacting with these AIs, psychologically, it's not the same. And we know that it's actually creating a more antisocial society. And so I'm just kind of curious if you have any recommendations for, as educators, how we can continue to promote human-centered relationships in this kind of AI age.
Yeah, great question. So the first thing is a lot of the AIs are actually designed to be sycophantic, because if I tell you you're great, which you are, I mean you're great, you're probably going to talk to me a bit more. So the first thing is AI literacy. Because let's face it, from a student's perspective, as well as an adult perspective, we're talking to this thing and we're going, as we saw with the Google researcher, going, it's sentient because it's talking to me and it says it likes me. It's like, no, that's just the model. It's an AI, it doesn't like you. If you died tomorrow, it wouldn't care. So the first thing is AI literacy. But the second thing is you actually have to take students offline. You literally eliminate the technology. And you can either do this basically with sort of classroom workshops or whatever it happens to be. So as humans, you still need to get in between you and the student and the AI. And if students see more value in talking to an AI for companionship or whatever it happens to be, what they're really saying is, I'm getting companionship from a machine that I can't find or don't want to find in the real world. This comes back to 50% of people, as well as in the US and Europe, are increasingly lonely, which comes back to your sort of point. So make the college as social a place as you can. And students won't necessarily like coming off tech. But actually, what I see with my own students is when you take them off tech, and you sort of go, did you enjoy running around in the playground? Did you enjoy having conversations with other people? They go, yeah, I love that. What do you prefer, that or talking to a bot? And they go, oh, I prefer that. But it is difficult. But this is sort of where community matters. And it's something we have to continuously work at, because if we don't work at it, yes, we'll all be talking to bots. Because my bot told me I was great. Thank you.
One more. Green shirt, yeah.
Okay. Yep.
And the question is, what do you think about Web3 blockchain tokenizing?
So, I've run with a variety of different companies where we're using Web3 basically to do fractional investment. So in Dubai, basically we're doing fractional real estate, et cetera, et cetera. On the one hand, when you have a look at the use of blockchain and Web3 basically to open up what we call the decentralized finance trend, we see the advent of private money, basically with things like stable coins. It's an interesting space. So I'll give you an AI and blockchain and crypto answer, if you like, that maps with what we've been discussing. So when we talk about the future of work, one of the things that I do with the US government, really from a future of work perspective, you care about having a job that has a wage. And what do you care about more, the job or the wage? If I said you're made redundant, what do you think about? Do you go, I can't go into school, I can't go into college any longer, or do you think, how do I pay the bills? So when we look at the future of work, we actually kind of care more, realistically, in some cases, about our income. So remember I said AI gives you access to all the world's knowledge, all the world's skills, and access to a global marketplace. There was a man called Mr. Mankind. He's an American. That's it. He was an artist, and as AI started creating digital art, the visits to his website went to zero, and over the course of a couple of months, he found that no one was buying his digital art. He's made redundant. His income is gone. AI, he hates it. However, he used ChatGPT to create a cryptocurrency. So ChatGPT created the cryptocurrency, came up with the name, and the name of the cryptocurrency is TurboToad. It created the marketing plan, it published the marketing plan, and it pushed the cryptocurrency to, at that point, X. 2 weeks later, that cryptocurrency had a market capitalization on the Californian Binance exchange of $250 million. Mr. Mankind went from, I hate AI, AI took my job, to, I love AI, I have $250 million in the bank. So when we think about things like the future of money, we have seen AI take a junk cryptocurrency called Gotius Maximus and pump it to $1.7 billion. So now imagine all your students, they go, we hate AI, but I tell you what, we're going to use AI to help us create a new cryptocurrency, and we're going to get that AI to get that cryptocurrency go viral. Every single one of your students in today's very, very science fiction-like, messed up, weird world could be multi-billionaires by next month, if they know how to use the tools, the technologies, and how to execute. So I'm a fan of blockchain and Web3 and everything else, for a variety of different odd reasons.
Let's give Matthew a hand for his knowledge he shared. We're so grateful. Thank you. Thank you.